This video is provided to you by my Udemy courses. I have a lot of Udemy courses regarding SwiftUI, iOS development, Combine, MVVM design pattern. I highly encourage you to check out my Udemy courses, and the best way to check out my courses is to take a look at the YouTube description where you will find all the links and the coupon codes for my courses. Thank you so much for viewing this video and supporting my channel. Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Shah Weekly. In this video, you're going to learn how to create, read, and delete data using CloudKit with a SwiftUI application. So let's go ahead and get started. The first step in starting with CloudKit is to enable CloudKit for your application. I'm going to go to the actual project. Make sure that you're selecting the target and add a capability. You can see that there are a lot of capabilities you can add for your project, but we are mostly interested in CloudKit. So I'm just going to go ahead and select Cloud. Double click on it, and now you can see that there is a new section that is added. I'm going to enable key value storage and CloudKit. Now, over here in the containers, you can already see a lot of different containers that are available. If you want to use an existing container, then go ahead and select that. Or if you want to create a new container, you can use the plus key to create a container. A container is kind of like a sandbox that you're creating where it will store all the information. I already have added a container, which is the iCloud Goods Stored container. So I'm just going to select that one. Perfect. Let's go ahead and refresh it. Okay, looks like it's set up. Let's go ahead and build the application. Great. Now, whenever you enable a container in iCloud settings that we are doing in the capability, we can also go online and check out our container. Now, this container that you are looking at, it's not something that I created brand new. I was already experimenting with CloudKit, so we can always go online and see if there is any data in there or not. But before we do that, it is important for us to go ahead and start creating our model classes, view models, and the view that will allow us to save a new store item into the database. So I'm going to go back to my code. And currently you can see that I don't really have any model. Like, what exactly do I want to store in CloudKit? It's always a good idea to create models instead of using dictionaries. So I can go over here, create a new group. I can call it models. And in the models, I'm going to go ahead and add a new Swift file, and I will simply call it item listing. The item listing is going to represent a single item that we want to store in CloudKit database. Item listing. What properties do you want to store in the CloudKit database? Well, one of them is string, and then the title, and then the price, which is decimal. So each item, like say if I'm selling a particular shoes, so title can be shoes and the price can be $50. All right. The other thing for item listing that we will have will be the record ID. This means this is a unique ID for a particular record that we are saving it in CloudKit. So we will add the record ID. In order to initialize a item listing, we can pass in the record ID, which is optional, title, price, and that's it. So this is going to create us an item listing. Now the next step that we want to do is in our view should be able to allow the user to add a brand new item. So this means that we need some sort of code over here that will allow the user to add the title and the price. So let's go ahead and create that. I'm going to go ahead and create the navigation view. And inside the navigation view, I'm going to get a stack. And now we can go ahead and add a text field for the title and another text field to get the price of the item. Now, the title as well as the price, they need to be state variables, are bindable state variables. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it on the top. Let's go ahead and refresh our view so that we can see what it actually looks like. So now you can see that we have added the two text boxes. That's great. Let's go ahead and add a bit of a padding. Great. And we can also add a spacer so everything is kind of pushed up. And we can also add the navigation title. You can add anything you want. I'm just going to call it Good Store. All right, so we have added the navigation title. Next step would be to add some sort of a button that will allow us to save it. I'm just going to go ahead and add a button. There we go, we got a button. And now we want to make sure that we are saving it. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get the price correctly, because the price can be, what we want is a decimal. So we're going to go get the decimal. There we go. Because the price, when you're adding it, or the bindable, that is a string, not a decimal. So we're converting it into a decimal. And after that, we have to save it. Now, since we're using SwiftUI application, it might be really beneficial, useful, that if we use MVVM design pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a new folder called View Models. I will go ahead and add new Swift file, item list view model, which means that we will be listing all the items. And inside the item list view model, we will have the save function, which will allow us to save a particular item. But before we do that, I'm just going to go ahead and use CloudKit or import CloudKit. I can also go ahead and say item list view model, observable object. Now, in order for our item list view model to perform any action on the store, on the CloudKit, we need to make sure that we are using the CloudKit database. We also need to make sure that somebody is passing us the container. And that's the important part. If we don't have access to the container, then we cannot create a database. We cannot have a database. And next up, we will create a custom initializer where you can pass in the container. We will go ahead and put the container into the property, and the database would be the container public database. The reason that we're using a public cloud database is that anyone who goes to our app will read from this public database and they can just display the values, all the values. But if they want to write something to the database, if they want to store a new item, then they have to be logged into their iCloud account. So reading is free, but writing, you have to log in. Okay. So I think that's pretty good. The next step, what we want to do is we want to actually implement the save function. Save item. You're going to pass in the title and the price. There we go. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a CK, which means CloudKit record. Record equals to CK record. And now we're saying that, okay, what type of record we're trying to create. And over there, I can pass in the record type. Now, this is fine, but I think we can do a little bit better by creating an enum, which will tell us what kind of a record it is. So I'm going to go ahead and create an enum. And now, instead of passing in a string over here, I can simply say record type dot item listing dot raw value. So now I'm basically targeting, and I'm saying that, hey, I want to create an item listing. That's the type of the record that I'm creating. All right, so that's the first thing. Now we already have the item listing, right? Because that's the model that we have created. So I'm going to say item listing, and I can go ahead and pass in the title. And I can say title is what? Title, and price is price. The next thing which we want to do is we can call record.setValue values for keys. And this will take a particular dictionary. And this is going to write or allow us to write the title and the price as a dictionary. And that is perfectly fine. If you want to go ahead and do it like this way, title is title and price is price, because that's the actual data that's going to be stored in CloudKit. But instead of doing this and using dictionaries, what we can do is we can go to our item listing model and we can create a function called toDictionary, which will allow us to convert our model to a dictionary. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a very simple function called toDictionary, and you can see that it is returning us a dictionary with two keys, the title and the price, and the value will be title and price. So now we can go back and start using this particular format. So instead of passing a dictionary over here, I can say item listing.toDictionary. Perfect. The final part is the actual saving part. So saving the record in database. And I'm going to go ahead and say self.database.save a particular record, which is record, and with a completion handler. So this will be the actual saved or new record that we will get. And if the error contains something, then we will simply go ahead and print the error. Else, well, we will go ahead and probably unwrap the new record and print out the record, or print out saved. That's it. Let's go ahead and use this because we haven't really used the item list view model. So let's go ahead and jump into our content view, and we're going to start using our item view model. I'm going to create a state object. Now, when we create a state object, we will also go ahead and create an instance over here, or a constructor, and assign it as a state object. Wrap value VM. All right. The problem is that the content view does not really have any dependency. So if I go over here, it is going to complain that, hey, you forgot to call the content view with a VM, meaning a view model. Now, if I try to create the view model, you can see that I need to pass in the container, which I don't have. So it's always a good idea to create the container using the bundle identifier. You can also get the container by saying container.default, but I have seen that when you do that, sometimes it does not pick up the correct bundle identifier or the cloud container ID, which is right over here. So it doesn't pick up CloudKit. It just says icloud.com.azamsharp.goodstore. Maybe I should have renamed it this way, but since our name consists of the word CloudKit as after the domain, it doesn't really pick up. But this way it will pick up because we're explicitly saying that this is a container name, which is great. All right, let's see what errors are we getting. Over here you can see the problem. Item list view model container, which is ckcontainer.default, so that our application can actually work. Making sure that we're getting the CK container, I'm going to import CloudKit over here. And finally, we need to make sure that we are saving it, right? So let's go ahead and save it. After we have created the VM, I'm going to say vm.saveItem, passing in the title and passing in the price. And right after saving the item, go ahead and clear out the title and the price fields. Great. Now we can run our application and see that if it will save a new item or not. All right, so let's go ahead and run the application and see that if we are successfully able to save our item to the CloudKit or not. I'm going to run the application. Now, one thing I have to be really sure, since I'm trying to write something to CloudKit, is that if I'm logged in or not. So let me go back over here to the settings, and I'm going to have to make sure, and you can see I'm not logged in. So if I'm not logged in, I won't be able to put something in the CloudKit storage, even though it is a public database. You do need to be logged in to do that. If you don't do that, if you don't log in, then you won't be able to do that. All right, so let me go ahead and sign into iCloud. Okay, so now I'm logged in. You can actually see that I'm logged in. That is great. That means I should be able to write something to the CloudKit database, to the public database. Let's go ahead and run the application again. Okay, so what should we save? It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to say shoes, and this is $45. I'm going to say save. And it says saved over here. So that is a good indication. But let's go to the CloudKit console and try to see if it's saved or not. Now, there are multiple ways of going to the CloudKit console. You can always click on CloudKit console and log in using the Apple ID account. So make sure you do that. This is what the CloudKit console will look like, making sure that you are selecting the right container. So that's an important part. Make sure that you're selecting the right container. Okay. Now, make sure that you're selecting public database. Record type is item listing. But by default, when you select the record type of item listing, it's not really going to allow you to query it. So in order for your record type to be queryable, you will have to go to indexes, item listing, add a basic index, and add an index on record name, and make sure that the index type is allowing you to query, making it queryable. Now let's go to the records, and I'm going to select item listing and say query. And there we go. So we just had our first record. You can see it's stored in the CloudKit database. All right, so let's go ahead and run the application and see that if we are successfully able to save our item to the CloudKit or not. I'm going to run the application. Now, one thing I have to be really sure, since I'm trying to write something to CloudKit, is that if I'm logged in or not. So let me go back over here to the settings, and I'm going to have to make sure, and you can see I'm not logged in. So if I'm not logged in, I won't be able to put something in the CloudKit storage, even though it is a public database. You do need to be logged in to do that. If you don't do that, if you don't log in, then you won't be able to do that. All right, so let me go ahead and sign into iCloud. Okay, so now I'm logged in. You can actually see that I'm logged in. That is great. That means I should be able to write something to the CloudKit database, to the public database. Let's go ahead and run the application again. Okay, so what should we save? It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to say shoes, and this is $45. I'm going to say save. And it says saved over here. So that is a good indication. But let's go to the CloudKit console and try to see if it's saved or not. Now, there are multiple ways of going to the CloudKit console. You can always click on CloudKit console and log in using the Apple ID account. So make sure you do that. This is what the CloudKit console will look like, making sure that you are selecting the right container. So that's an important part. Make sure that you're selecting the right container. Okay. Now, make sure that you're selecting public database. Record type is item listing. But by default, when you select the record type of item listing, it's not really going to allow you to query it. So in order for your record type to be queryable, you will have to go to indexes, item listing, add a basic index, and add an index on record name and make sure that the index type is allowing you to query, making it queryable. Now let's go to the records, and I'm going to select item listing and say query. And there we go. So we just had our first record. You can see it's stored in the CloudKit database. Now the next thing that we want to do is to make sure that we can display a list of our items. So let's go back to the item list view model. And in the view model, we're going to implement a function called populate items. And the responsibility of populate items is to go and fetch all the items of a particular record type, which is item listing, and to display on the screen. All right. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and create a query, CK query. We need to specify what kind of items that you want to fetch from the CloudKit. So I'm just going to say record type dot item listing dot raw value and the predicate. In this case, I don't really want to add a predicate because I just want to get everything anyways. So I'm just going to say true. Okay. Now, one of the things that I found out about CloudKit is that Apple team has made it very, very nested to get the actual objects or records out for some weird reason, because I have used Firebase before and some other frameworks, and they don't really nest items so much. And you'll get an idea when we are about to fetch anything. So I'm going to say database.fetch. And you can see that with the fetch, we can pass in a query, which we already have. So here's the query. But you can see the result that you're getting in the completion handler, the closure, consists of a result type, which is an enum, and that will contain tuples, multiple tuples, right? So it's becoming a little bit weird. So I'm just going to go ahead and say result. And now we can perform a result on the switch, because the result can be a success or a failure. If it is a success, it doesn't give us the items. It just gives us some sort of another result, which is kind of weird, right? I mean, it should have given us the record or items, but it doesn't. So now we have to go and say result again over here. And we can go ahead and print out result dot match results. The other one is the failure. So we're just going to get the failure, and whatever the failure is, I'm just going to go ahead and display the error. But obviously, we don't really have the records yet. We have match results. So what we will do is, if you look at the results, so result.match results, it's an array of tuples. So we have to go through this. We will ignore the ones that are nil, although I don't think there will be anything nil. So you can use a map over here. And we are only going to pick up the first one in the tuple, and then we can go ahead and perform a for each. So the first one means that is another result, right? And on that, we can perform a success. And finally, we will get the actual record, which we can go ahead and print it out. or we can store it somewhere, or else we will get the error. So I'm not really sure why the Apple CloudKit team decided to make it so complicated for such a simple thing, but that is the code that I'm using. Now, still we are not done, because we have a record over here, and this is simply a record. We need to convert this record into an item listing. So if I go to the item listing, I can probably create a small function that will convert a record to an item listing. And the reason that we are converting it to item listing is because later on it will be sent to a view model. So from record, you can pass in a record which is CK record, and it will return you an item listing. Now, converting to item listing is actually pretty straightforward. You're just going to extract out the value from the record, which these values can include the title, and they can include the price also, and we will return you a brand new item listing object. And that is something we can actually use. So going back to our code, once you get the record, we can create an item listing by saying item listing dot from record. And once we have the item listing, now we can add it to some sort of an array, but we don't really have an array. So let's go ahead and create an array. There we go. Items.append and then item listing. Perfect. All right, so now we have hopefully an array of item listing. That's great. But if we want to put something on the screen, we want to move the item listing, which is a model, into a view model. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need is an actual view model. So I will create a view model that is going to represent a single item listing. Nothing complicated. It's just called item view model. You have to pass in an actual model, which is the item listing. You will have the record ID, title, and price. All the three things that are required by the view. Now, in our main view model, which is called the item list view model, which represents the entire screen, I can go ahead and create an instance of an array of item view models. And when the populate function is done, that is where I can make sure that I'm assigning it. Items equals to items.map item view model dot init. So these items that we're going through, these ones are coming from this one, and this one is actually the array of item view model. Now, since the items over here, you can see they're marked with published, it is important that you set it on the main queue. So I'm going to switch the queue over here, dispatch queue.main.async, and I'm going to make sure that we are setting it on the main queue. If you don't set it on the main queue, then Xcode is eventually going to tell you that, hey, what are you doing? Okay. So this is great. The final step in this, what we have to do is go to the content view and try to see if we can display all the items. So I'm going to go right here and list, which you can use a list, but I'm just going to use a for each, and you'll know in a minute why I'm using a for each. vm.items, the ID will be record ID. By the way, the items over here is an array of item view model. Item in, and we can perform a at stack. Text item dot title. Now, depending on what you want to view, you can also add the actual price. I don't really recommend that you add the price like this using the $sign. I would say you should use some sort of a number formatter, and the price symbol should be based on your locale. But we're not learning about that right now. If you want to check it out, check out some of my previous videos where I have covered that. Okay, so this is all good. The final thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that we are calling on appear, and inside on appear, we are populating the items. Let's go ahead and run it. If we see our item on the screen, which we see, there we go. That's a success. Now, another thing you will keep in mind is that even if I don't type anything in the title and price, the save button is still active. So I don't like that. I want to make sure that the save button is only activated if and only if I have written something in the text field. So I'm just gonna use the trimming characters, and so now even if you go ahead and press space, it's not going to be available unless you write something else. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that whatever I want to buy from the store, and now whatever it will cost. And now the save button is activated. Now when I save it, it actually does save to the database, to the CloudKit. But you can see that it doesn't refresh this. Now you might be wondering that if I go to the item list view model, and as soon as you save something, which is right here, calling the populate function or populate items over there is going to fix the issue, but it's not. And the reason is that when you call populate items, the save is still even not done finishing the save function, which is kind of weird. And this is the first time I have seen in any of these APIs that even though the save is firing the callback, it's not perfectly saved because the indexes have to be calculated, and that takes a little bit of time, and that time is more than enough to say that the item is not saved. So that's why when you save an item, you don't really see that item on the screen. It's sad that it doesn't work that way. It's kind of like a really weird thing, but what I'm going to do, which I don't really like, but that's the only solution I've found, is I'm going to go ahead and simply add the item to our items collection without checking that if the item is actually saved or not. The only indication that the item is saved is, well, if there's no error, and that's it. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new item listing, and you know the rest. We're just going to go ahead and add it to our items array by adding a items view model. With that, let's go ahead and run it again. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I want to buy some socks from the store. Socks will cost, let's say, $4.50 or something. Save it. And now you can see socks appearing. And probably about now, the item will be saved in the CloudKit database with the indexes and everything set up. Okay, so the final thing that we want to do is to actually delete the item. All right, so let's go ahead and create a small function over here, which is going to be responsible for deleting the item. I will call it delete item. You can simply pass in the record ID because that is kind of like the primary key for the item. In order to delete the item, we will simply call database.delete with record ID. We will pass in the record ID and the completion handler. I believe this is the deleted record ID and the error. If let error equals to error, then, well, if there's some error, then probably we should do something about it. If not, then we will simply populate the items. Now let's go to the content view, and we need to make sure that the delete function is getting fired. And that's the main reason that we use for each, so we can attach onDelete modifier to it. The onDelete modifier, which we're going to implement right here, allows us to delete by simply swiping. So I'm going to say index set, which is index set. That's a signature. We will go over all the different indexes that you have set to delete, which in our case is, I guess, it's only one. We will get the actual item, vm.items with index, and we will go ahead and get the record ID, which is item.recordID, which because it is optional. And finally, we will call delete item and pass in the record ID. All right. Okay. Well, that doesn't like what we're doing. Let's go ahead and remove that from here and put it right there, because I think we put it in the wrong place. It's part of the for each. Let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, so we have a couple of these different items added. If I want to delete the socks, I can simply swipe it and delete. And now the socks are gone, and they're also gone from our CloudKit. And just to prove it, I can go ahead and run the app again, and you will see there's no more socks. Let's go ahead and add something again. Now I'm just going to buy a hat, which is $10. And now it is added to the CloudKit as well as on the screen. And I can also delete items if I don't want. So in this, basically in this video, you have learned how to use SwiftUI application using MVVM design pattern and integrate it with CloudKit and save everything to CloudKit, perform create operation, retrieving, fetching operation, as well as deleting operation. And that's pretty much it. I really hope that you have enjoyed it, and go ahead and give a thumbs up and also share this video with everyone. Thank you so much.